I disagree.
It's science. I'm sorry. It's science. If you're wearing a mask,
science.
it's a different story.
500 people at a Lowe's aren't any safer than 150 people in a restaurant that holds 600. I don't believe it. Sorry. Don't believe it. And I live in an area where there's a lot of restaurants that have fought back and they don't have any problems. And they're open.
Okay.
I read something once that stated, where there is shouting, there is no true knowledge. And we see that clear as day here. Earlier today, the little shouting man, who is Rick Santelli, an editor and financial analyst over on CNBC Business News Network, he's so angry about the possibility of shutting down restaurants to save lives during this pandemic. He's so angry that he's spewing out an opinion that could lead to many deaths. Many more deaths, I should say. The host of the CNBC show, Andrew Sorkin, tries to add a disclaimer, but Santelli was adamant about the importance of restaurants as if it were a life and death decision, which it actually is. And I hate to say it, but his choice is closer to death, especially for the poor.
Rick, I just as a public health and public service announcement for the audience, the difference between a big box retailer.
Who is this?
Hold on. The difference between it's Andrew.
Who else?
The difference between a big box retailer. Hold on. The difference between a big box retailer and a restaurant, or frankly even a church, are so different. It's unbelievable. Going into a big box retailer,
I disagree.
You're wearing
You can
a mask.
have your thoughts and I can have mine.
You're required to wear a mask.
I disagree.
It's science. I'm sorry. It's science. If you're wearing a mask, it's a different story.
500 people at a Lowe's aren't any safer than 150 people in a restaurant that holds 600. I don't believe it. Sorry. Don't believe it. And I live in an area where there's a lot of restaurants that have fought back and they don't have any problems. And they're open.
Okay.
This is exactly how capitalists are surviving the pandemic. They require everyone else to live in misery and die so they can continue to fill their own pockets. Santelli is no different than Trump in his response to the pandemic, keeping restaurants open and giving them money to stay open while people have lost their jobs, evictions, can't feed their kids, facing foreclosure. They don't care about all that. Hence, no second stimulus check. They care about themselves. That's more important than people being required to wear a mask, social distance, and stay home to save lives. There's more.
I think many of these governors are intelligent people, and they love their families, which they've taken out into restaurants. Therefore, there is actually and should be an ongoing debate as to, why a parking lot for a big box store like by my house is jam-packed. Not one parking spot open. Why are those people any safer than a restaurant with plexiglass? I just don't get it. And I think there's a million of these questions that could be asked, and I think it's really sad that when we look at the service sector and all the discussions we've had about job losses, that particular dynamic isn't studied more, isn't worked more. We don't put more people in the room and try to figure out ways so that these service sector employees and employers could all come back in a safer way.
Going into a store that requires masks and social distancing is very different than pulling up to a restaurant that doesn't have any requirements for masks, any contingency plans, or precautions. There are so many studies that back this up. Just Google it. Thousands of people are dying because of these capitalists who chose to make money for themselves and their friends. The government is not for the people, it's for their pockets. All I really hear when Santelli speaks is him bragging about keeping the rich rich and killing off the poor. Listen to what he said about the virus back in March.
I'm not a doctor. All I know is think about how the world would be if you tried to quarantine everybody because of the generic type flu. Now, I'm not saying this is the generic type flu, but maybe we'd be just better off if we gave it to everybody, and then in a month it would be over, because the mortality rate of this probably isn't going to be any different if we did it that way than the long-term picture. But the difference is we're wreaking havoc on global and domestic economies.
Facts don't care about what you believe. And the fact is we are now at 14.2 million cases nationwide and counting, with over 277,000 deaths and counting. And you're screaming about a restaurant being open. How about we pay people to stay home, suspend rent and mortgage payments? No, that's too expensive. The government can't afford that. But having people die, spending money they hardly have to keep people like Santelli and those who run our government rich, that's priceless. I'm Rebecca Azor, and you guys already know where to keep it locked for politics and more. right here on The Benjamin Dixon Show.